Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to kind of start off and kind of give people a little bit of background in this film. So the script is written by Lena Waithe, and she's been very public about saying that you were her first and only choice to direct this, and that if you said no, she had no idea what she was going to do. I feel like a lot of people in Hollywood say things like that, but with her, I kind of tend to believe it. So I'm curious how, though, she approached you with the script and sort of what the process was.
Well, we met because I directed an episode, a really special episode for her and for me, of Master of None called Thanksgiving. And that episode is about her coming out as a black woman to her mother. And we really bonded on that. Actually, for that, she also chased me down, and I was like, I don't know. But I read the script, and it was so beautiful and poetic and historic, and what I felt really important. I had never seen a black woman come out on television, and so I knew I wanted to be a part of that moment. And we had this immediate trust between us, and this beautiful collaboration and spirit that I hadn't really enjoyed with anyone else in the same way. And so while we were working on that, she was writing the script for this, and she's like, I'm doing my first feature. I'd love for you to do it. And I was like, well, let's see how the script turns out. Not because I didn't trust it, I just don't like my relationships to dictate what I work on. And I really like my passion for the project and the foundation to be what drives me. And I read that script and I couldn't put it down, and it was everything I wanted in a film, especially as a first feature. It was political, it was poetic, it was important, but also like really commercial, I felt. It had a lot to say, while still being just this beautiful, like, languid love story. And so it began, and we worked on the script for months, and went back and forth, and then we got it sold, and we got it made, just like that.
But speaking about it being just that easy, I feel like you guys had some pretty remarkable kinds of just sort of leeway with what you were allowed to make. Just that, you kind of think you had final say, and you didn't have all these test screenings and everything. So what was that pre-production process like, of just making sure that you could make the movie that the two of you really...
we were in a really special point, I think, in both of our careers. She had just won an Emmy. A lot of people wanted to see what my first feature was. And I do believe as artists, and we had Daniel Kaluuya, so we had this kind of trifecta going into selling the piece that was really powerful. And I think, we as artists really understand our value as Black people and our story and our culture and how much that is taken from us and traded around the world, and we really wanted to own it. And so we wanted to make sure that whoever partnered with us could see the value in our stories and in us as filmmakers as well. And we were really fortunate to have a couple people really interested in making the film in our way. And so we did get final cut, and as a director, I wanted to shoot on film, and I wanted to shoot on the road and really do a road journey and shoot in 3 states and not be stuck on a stage. And we had these kind of mandates going into it that we really wanted, and we were able to attain because of our positioning and because of knowing our own worth.
What were you most nervous about getting lost? When you're kind of looking at, what could this lose? What could people be nervous about? Sort of what were you most protective of?
I think for me, just as a filmmaker, the tension. What I loved about the script is how it's able to navigate so many different genres at once. It kind of plays between fantasy and reality. It plays between being a love story and a horror story at the same time, and not getting rid of the tension. I love that Lena is so daring in the way that she writes. Is like, there's no B story. There's no like cop chasing them story that usually you would see traditionally in Hollywood. And she's like able to defy these kind of norms. And I wanted to mirror that in how I shot it. That's why sometimes it does feel like a dream, because I wanted it to feel like authentically what it feels like to be in love. And then obviously a lot of my choices were rooted in authenticity and reality. But not losing sight, I think, of the tension and the chase as we were on this really beautiful kind of connection between these two people.
What were you reading while you were developing this? Sort of what kind of supplemental inspiration?
I was actually reading a lot of poetry at the time, Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou. I was watching a lot of things to make sure that my choices were rooted in authenticity. I was watching a lot of real YouTube videos of black people being pulled over by the police to make sure that I could, photograph that scene in a very realistic way, and that we could place audiences in that feeling of what it feels like being a person of color and seeing that siren turn on behind you and not knowing if you'd make it out of that encounter. And then I was watching a lot of my favorite films. Like I love, In the Mood for Love, and I wanted to kind of create that same kind of tonality through it and have those like really long language shots and have the rich colors and the feeling kind of showcase the passion. Another one of my biggest inspirations is Belly by Hype Williams. I grew up an MTV baby. I come from music videos, and the way that he's able to photograph black culture and people is in a way that I hadn't seen before. And so you'll see a lot of his influence in a lot of my work. Julie Dash and Mira Nair, and how they're able to like capture culture, and that it feels very much authentic, and you're placed in like another world that you're not familiar with, but you get to understand through like being another person on that journey. So it was a lot of things.
Yeah, I can definitely see. I can see all those, particularly Wong Kar-wai.
Yeah, thank you.
So kind of on that note, I really want to talk about your location scouting work on this film, because it's
it was long.
Right. There's that
Lengthy.
great scene where Slim is sort of looking out at the landscape and talking about how beautiful it is, and then you see the prison laborers, and I felt like the movie kept doing that to you throughout. You're just really struck by the beauty, and then you're kind of pulled unwillingly out of it.
Yeah.
So, just how did you find all these? Was it? I know you shot largely in Ohio and then New Orleans, but
We shot mostly in New Orleans and some in Ohio.
Yeah.
I'm really hard on location scouting. I am like never happy, and sometimes most of the time we end up in the first place that we saw. But I just like to entrench myself in the locations and in the place so I get an understanding of the landscape. And I knew we'd have to like make New Orleans represent a lot of different states on their journey. And so we just really sat in a car for months and didn't give up on pushing and trying to make it as authentic as possible. And it was just going back to like, our favorite spots and never being satisfied, especially when you're shooting in like a New Orleans where like, they have somewhat of a thriving industry, but a lot of people like to go back to the same places, and I really hate that. I like it to feel like very individual and singular to this vision, and so I've really pushed. And literally I found that tarmac at the end on my Yelp. It's like, I know this exists. There's like this airstrip in the Florida Keys that looks like that, and I was like, we couldn't go to the Florida Keys, but I just wouldn't give up. And then I found that thing on Yelp, so it's just like, ooh. It's a really good scouting tool, actually, because you can get that 3D street view. You're like, it doesn't look like that anymore. You're like, where did they shoot this? Anyway, yeah. So it was a very in-depth process, but I think it worked in it.
Right. Another thing I want to talk about, just from a visual sense, is that shot that the kid takes of the two of them on the car. I feel like in a lot of ways that's kind of one of the most important shots in the movie, because you have to really believe that this would spread and that this would be meaningful to people. This would be on murals. So what inspired just that composition?
So much. Obviously one of the biggest the biggest themes in this film is legacy, right? And I knew that image would represent their legacy, moving past that point. And so a couple interesting things inspired it. One was actually Nipsey Hussle and the death of Nipsey Hussle, and the murals and the community coming together to honor him in his passing, and this icon that he became in his death. And we talk so much about how Black lives are often more celebrated in death than in life. And so we wanted to kind of recreate something of that sort. And then when it came to the actual photograph, it was interesting. I am an admirer of a lot of people. We were able to bring down 4 young Black photographers to shoot alongside me, and they all shot in their own different ways to interpret Clean and Slim. And this particular photograph was shot by an amazing man named Andre Wagner, and he shoots black and white film, very much in a similar way to like Roy Degarava, somebody that's like in the community and really highlighting like true authenticity. And so I knew that like I couldn't get the actor to shoot it, and I didn't want to. And I wanted to highlight other Black young photographers that I admired, it was also kind of self-indulgent, and give them opportunities that they probably wouldn't have gotten. And so Andre came down. It was his first day. He was there a couple of days. He was also there at the Juke Joint and the riot. And, you know, we had like 10 minutes at the end of a very long night. And he captured it with me, like, prowling behind him, just making sure it matched the scene. But, you know, it was gorgeous. And then he went home and developed it and sent me the photo on text, and I knew we had it. And it became, you know, our outdoor campaign. It became the image for the film and the marketing campaign, too. So it's like there's a through line there that I find really interesting.
And another interesting thing, I mean, thinking about the protest scene, is that's kind of the first scene where we really, there are hints of it before, but the first scene where we really understand, like, how this story is going over.
This movement.
How it's become a movement, which is, I mean, we're used to processing things sometimes entirely through what we see filtered on Twitter and on the news and everything, and you just get these tiny little hints of it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why you made that choice to really just stay with them, you know, without their phones, not knowing really what's happening.
I love that, like, going back to how Lena is able to write, like, that you get to experience these characters as they do. You get to learn about them as they're learning about each other. I thought that was a really interesting choice. And there's not a lot of exposition or, like, backstory. And to me, it's daring, it's courageous, and it's also very realistic on how we get to experience. Like, you know, they throw out their phones, and there is this movement swelling that they've started. I always thought of it like if somebody had killed Zimmerman, you know, and like overnight that person would probably be a hero. And there's this groundswell that they're not even aware of because they're caught in their own bubble, you know, which also like reflects their love story and like how that feels too when you're just in it with one person and like nothing else kind of matters at the same time. And the riot is obviously the culmination of both of those things happening at the same time.
How hard was it to get the balance right between, I mean, the sort of fugitive story, the political elements, and then just the love story, the development of this relationship, which almost kind of, it almost flows in a way like a before sunrise or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like kind of parallel to everything going on. Like how much tinkering did you have to do to make that make sense?
I mean, a lot of it was there, but like I said, like I was really conscious of the chase and maintaining that because I knew we could just get lost in like the poetry of the love story, right? And I wanted you to still feel that tension and also have that tension kind of inform how they interact with each other at times too, right? And force them to take risks that they wouldn't necessarily take. So the tension also, you know, informs their love story in many ways. And it was difficult, you know, trying to obviously you don't shoot in order and trying to understand where they are in their relationship and in regards to like where they are in the chase and in the tension that they're feeling and in the groundswell that's happening around them. It was definitely something I was conscious of. I kind of charted it out in ways where there was like, okay, in this act we're here, and then by the time they meet this, and you know, like there's different steps in obviously their relationship, and also that tension that they're feeling.
I want to ask too about casting this film. I mean, you mentioned that Daniel Kaluuya was been kind of involved from a very early stage, but what about Jodie Turner-Smith? I mean, sort of what quality did she have that really convinced you she could take this character?
I mean, what quality didn't she have? You know, Lena and I, we know the importance, obviously, of diversity in this industry, and we really wanted to use this as an opportunity to break a new Black actress, especially because we had Daniel. We wanted to use that opportunity, and we also wanted for her to be dark-skinned. We wanted to have a love story between two dark-skinned people represented on screen because it's like not something we see, and also redefine what love and beauty looks like. Like that's definitely something I try to do in all of my work. It's like the closer you are to a European standard, the more accepted you've been as a Black person. And so that was really important for us to do. And it's really kudos to Carmen Cuba, who's our amazing casting director. But in the first round of casting tapes, Jodie was there, and she had everything we were looking for. You know, she was confident. She was also really vulnerable. She could be naive at times, but also like rooted in her education. And she's obviously stunning. So she had it all, and you know, it was almost too good to be true. And we kept pushing, and we kept looking at more tapes, and nobody could beat her. And we brought her in for a test with Daniel. And I always say it, but he shrank. He shrank in the first meeting, and it was like he became slim, right? Because it's also like you need somebody who shows up to meet Daniel Kaluuya for a Tinder date and is disappointed.
Right.
You know, not easy to achieve. And you know, we tested a couple other people, and he was somewhat carrying the other people. And when she walked in, he became slim, and their chemistry was like undeniable from the start. And we were so excited. She was also the last of our chem test, and we were a bit scared for a minute. But yeah, she gave us hope, and she became our queen.
So, I mean, obviously this movie's only been out in public for a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
But it's already inspired, I mean, quite a bit of really interesting writing and criticism. I mean, I'm sure you saw Jelani Cobb wrote an amazing piece in The Yorker. What has surprised you most about the responses you've seen and the analysis?
I think it's surprising how much cultural impact this film has had. I haven't seen this amount of dialogue, good and bad, about the film. I haven't seen people so affected by a film. It was really surprising coming from music videos. You know, the only time I can remember this amount of dialogue has been when I did Beyonce's Formation video, and it caused a lot of like think pieces and critiques, and the same thing happened from this film. And it's really satisfying as an artist because that's why I do this, right? I do it to start a dialogue, to create empathy, to create some sort of change that might come from these conversations, and to see how effective people are. It's really beautiful, but it was completely surprising.
I also wanted to talk about, talking about your background. The score here, we have Dev Hynes. I think is this his first really
I think he did it's probably of this size.
Of this size,
yeah.
There we go. Of this scope.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you choose him, and then what were you looking for in that? Because the way his score weaves in with the music you have, is
I really wanted the music in general to show the gamut of black music and show its historical roots from soul into hip-hop, into bounce, into Afrobeat, and everything in between. And so I needed somebody to score it in a way where they understood all of those elements and could also form a beautiful transition between them. And I wanted a black composer. And it's funny, I had just watched, Rashida Jones did a piece on her father, Quincy Jones. Sure. She did a beautiful documentary about his work, and I was thinking, like, who's our Quincy Jones? You know, he's like classically trained, and he had his hands in so many pieces of work that I was not aware of at all, that are so different. And so I talked to my friends who have worked with Dev, and she recommended it, did an album together. And she recommended him, and we had one conversation, and I knew he was right. And it's funny, we had maybe 3 weeks to score the whole thing, and he did his first pass in a weekend. And I was like, that could be terrible or great. And we sat, and he just said, he's like, this is how I work, and people think it's because I'm not putting any effort, but I just was so inspired. And we sat down, and most of his original scores in there, and then some stuff like the ending obviously was really difficult to nail, and he must have done like 40 versions of it, but he was such an amazing collaborator, and his understanding of all kinds of music is so in-depth and so layered. And he was also able, I think, to do that kind of genre-defying kind of approach, where it's like it starts off with this crazy tension. He needs to do a horror film because the beginning is like, very much like about some zombies about to pop out, which they kind of do.
Right, which is
and
so far removed from like Blood Orange. Right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a chameleon in that way. And then he has these really beautiful loving romantic sounds that happen later, and it's just like him on the piano, doing the stream of conscious, and he brought in these amazing saxophone players, and he's just phenomenal. So I was really happy to work with him.
There's one impossibly broad question I have to ask you, which is just simply, what do you want people to take from this film?
That's a question I get often.
Okay.
I want people to be impacted. I want this to create a dialogue. I want this to create empathy for people of color and an understanding of who we are and how we experience life. But I also want people to have their own reactions, and I don't want to tell them what to think, because I feel like that's what art is, right? It's about your interpretation of it and what you bring to it and where you are in your life. So I want you to feel this, but not really feel what you want. So I won't dictate it.
Smart. So we only have a little bit of time left, but I'm curious if anyone has a really burning question that they wanted to get on. Yes, in the back.
Talking to me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jamila. Really enjoyed the film.
Thank you.
Sorry, this question's a little tough, but I just want to ask it. And I know that the ending, it was inevitable for them to die. Like, it was a part of it. But and it was an homage to so many, like, it was great. But how do you think it would have changed it if they had lived? How do you think the story would have been changed had they gone on that plane?
I mean, it would have been a fantasy, right? It would have been a completely different story. It's definitely something that I feel, for me, would have been irresponsible. I wanted to represent the realities in which I experience life, in which we experience life as people of color. I root all my decisions in authenticity, and honestly, it probably would have been a film that I wouldn't have made. Lena and I have talked a lot about the ending because there's been a lot of conversation about it. And even how she had written it a slightly different way, they didn't get away. They didn't get away in the end, but I just wanted it to be complicated, and I wanted it to be real, and I wanted people to understand, how Black people experience life. And I love documentaries, and I love things that are real. I don't really, enjoy fantasy genre, and so I made a choice.
And even then, though, I mean, because you have the Asada Shakur thing, and then she's someone who actually did escape to Cuba, so that there's almost like, even though it seems inevitable where the story is headed, there's that little glimmer of maybe they get out of this.
Yeah, which I think is great. I think that's what keeps us watching. It's like, okay, this happened for a couple of us, and will it happen for them? But it's for me, it didn't feel honest, and in a way, irresponsible.
Well, look, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sticking around.